Everybody, welcome to the Badgerland Birding Podcast, bringing you birding news and stories from the Badger State, which is Wisconsin and beyond. Today, we're with our friend Alex Harman to talk about birding in Oklahoma. So, Alex, you want to tell us just a little bit about who you are and what you're up to these days?
Sure. So I'm a graduate student at Oklahoma State University. Most of my background is actually in entomology. So I'm in the entomology department. I study insects. I'm the insect diagnostician. So whenever anyone in the state has a mystery insect, they can send an email to me and hopefully I can identify it for them. But I'm also an avid birder. I started birding in my undergrad, and I've been doing it for about 7 years now. So
That's pretty cool, the big bug guy on campus then.
yeah.
Well, not only on campus though, we always our group of friends constantly send him pictures of insects over Facebook Messenger. We're just like, Alex, what is this? And if you've been watching our channel for a while, you might remember Alex from when we went to Oklahoma and did some birding around the area, which I think it's funny because every area we go, we go birding in the best spots and like the most exciting places. So I have a very positive view of Oklahoma. So I was like, that place was wild and awesome all the time.
Yeah, I mean, we went to some great spots that I'm sure we'll talk about during this podcast. So
Yeah,
looking forward to it.
Okay, so first of all, you started with bugs. How did you then get into birds? Was it like you were watching a bug and then a bird ate it, and you're like, oh, what bird is that?
That
that
thing
ate that?
seems better than the insects.
So I got into both mostly due to my grandma. So she taught entomology and she taught ornithology. So I had that background growing up. We'd go down to the Mississippi River in the wintertime and look at the bald eagles roosting, but I never really got super into it until winter of my freshman year of college, because usually in the winter I'd be inside pinning all the insects that I collected over the summer, identifying them, curating them, that sort of stuff. But all of those were at home, so I needed a new hobby to do in the wintertime at college. So I had an extra pair of binoculars lying around and decided to start looking at birds. And it went from there.
What was kind of the first one you saw that made you get into it?
So, kind of my spark bird, so to speak, I always kind of designate as a hooded merganser. So I was driving between Dodgeville and Baraboo along the Wisconsin River there. There's a lot of little like lakes scattered all around there. And I saw this weird looking duck, black and white with a cool crest and everything. And I had no idea what that was. It flew off before I could get some pictures of it. But I looked through bird guides and came up with a few possibilities. Bufflehead, hooded merganser. I wasn't super familiar with duck ID at the time. So in hindsight, figured out it was a hooded merganser. But that encouraged me to join the Birding Wisconsin Facebook group, or Birds of Wisconsin, or whatever it was at that point in time.
Oh,
and that kind of exposed, yeah, I know it changes every single year, it seems. But that got me exposed to birders and birding in general. And I saw all the other cool stuff that was out there. And I was like, oh, I really should be looking for some of this.
Yeah, I do think when you're interested in one, it just kind of gets you outside and then you start looking at everything else. So you're also big into herping, finding reptiles and amphibians too. So I feel like when one thing makes you go outside, you're like, dang, there's all this other cool stuff out here too.
Yeah, I feel like when you go, looking for birds or whatever, then all of a sudden you stumble across like a cool snake or something. You definitely, it's that whole experience of being out in the nature that's even more fun. I think we were into like fish and we were into reptiles and amphibians. And then we were into owls, and then birds were kind of like one of the last things that we were actually probably into when we were kids, at least, for us.
Have you gotten into fish yet? Is that coming?
I have not. If I see a dead fish on the side of a riverbank, or I catch one like in a dip net or something, I'll take a picture of it, put it onto iNaturalist, but I haven't really gotten super into them yet.
Maybe I know the waters, at least down in like Louisiana, are so muddy. It's a hard thing, from land to get into. You need to go to some clear water spots, and then you can do some fish watching from the shore.
Then you can pin them just like insects.
Let's not do that.
You can cook them though.
You could cook.
Depends what
you
it
can
is.
have a different kind of life list.
Yeah.
So the Oklahoma birding scene. So we went down and we went to really cool places like Gloss Mountain, Wichita Mountains, just some beautiful scenery places that kind of seemed like classic Oklahoma. When you think of Oklahoma, there's like, these rolling, well, I guess not
I
rolling,
feel like when
but
you think of
these
Oklahoma, you
meadows.
actually just think of nothing. You think it's flat.
I don't know.
That's
I
what I
think of
thought of Oklahoma.
plateaus and
He's
things
laughing.
like
Look at
that.
he knows. I think
You
personally,
gotta,
I'm just gonna throw it out there. I feel like most people that have never been to Oklahoma think that Oklahoma is boring and flat and hot and dusty.
Hot and dusty for sure. Boring and flat depends on where you're at. So, like once you get
boring
into
and
the
flat depends on where you're at.
And that's the state slogan.
Hot and dusty.
like as you're driving out west, once you get into the Oklahoma Panhandle, that's about 3 hours of boring and flat. But it's a lot hillier than I expected in much of the state. And you get into the east, and you even have the Ozark Mountains and the Ouachita Mountains, and in the southwest, you have the Wichita Mountains. There's some pretty nice scenery if you're in the right area.
Yeah, I think we should do like a recap of that trip because thinking about that trip, it was really fun. I remember we did it road trip style. So we drove like how many hours was that?
I don't know. It was a lot.
It was a lot of hours, and we were finally starting to get into Oklahoma when it was getting late in the day. And I remember one of the things that was super cool was we found a box turtle in the road. And I think it was an ornate box turtle, wasn't it?
Yeah, and so we moved that out of the road on the
And
way
that was like on the
in.
way into Oklahoma, and then we got to your place at like 1 a.m.,
Well,
I think.
before we even did that, we started seeing the scissor-tail flycatchers on the power lines, and it was like in the meadows, and we saw some of the like oil derricks too, like the oil, things that pump the oil. You're like, yeah, we're getting into Oklahoma now. There's
Yeah.
scissor-tail flycatchers, there's oil,
Well, it is
there's box
funny
turtles.
because when you go to just different regions, I mean, Oklahoma, in the grand scheme of things, isn't that far away from Wisconsin, really. But the stuff that's there in terms of the flora and the fauna is so vastly different. So we get in there and we're just like, wow, this is a completely new environment altogether.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I thought you were gonna have like a very polarizing viewpoint there because it looked like you were really, taking your time with the response, but then no.
No, I was just listening to the whole thing. I had that exact same experience when I came to Oklahoma for the first time from doing field work in Nebraska. You get to about mid-Kansas, and suddenly all the parking lots have gray-tailed grackles, and you see the scissor-tails pretty much every fence post, and you're just like, wow, not in the upper Midwest anymore.
Yeah. Do you remember what the first thing we did was the next day? 'Cause
Yes.
we got in late, and then the
I
next
know
day we started
we
early.
hung out around Stillwater for a while, which was cool.
We got kicked out of the cross-country course.
We did.
I remember
get kicked
correctly.
Out of the
cross-country
cross-country course. I was just talking to someone about that the other day because somebody was like, what's one time you had like a really odd run-in with somebody else? And I was like, the cross-country course, because
Yeah,
there was a guy like curating it, and he's like, you guys better get out of here. And I think it's public, isn't it?
it is. And it's open like every weekday now. They have a whole schedule. It locks when it's not open. So if it's not open, you can't even get into it. I don't know what his problem was that day.
You got really mad at
But
us, and then after I
yeah,
felt he was like guilty though. Do you remember that? He was like,
I do. It was
fine,
very
you can
odd.
stay.
And I've never ran into that interaction there before or since. So
Yeah. So basically,
congrats.
the story was we were doing some birding. We were going to the cross country course.
A likely
and
spot.
We went inside, and then the guy came and yelled at us for being there. Said they were doing some kind of maintenance or something. But
So
it was
didn't he say that
it
like
was open.
you guys keep tearing it up or something? Like
I
as
don't
if
know.
we
It
were
seemed
there
like he was
regularly.
like something was bothering him already. But
Marital
basically,
problems.
I don't know. Basically, he was yelling at us for being there. And then eventually we were like, we're just birding. He's like, I guess you guys are fine. But at that point, we're just like, let's just go. I don't really feel comfortable being here. So then
Yeah.
we
Yes.
left and went somewhere else.
Yeah, where'd we
Well,
go?
we stopped by the little power plant because that's where the scissor-tails were nesting and the western kingbirds were nesting right next to my apartment.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Was it funny for people to be there like geeking out over that stuff after you were established in that area? Where you kind of like, ha, rookies.
Not really, because everyone who comes down here has that, wow, scissor-tailed flycatchers moment. And then they see them everywhere. I still get excited when I see the first ones of the spring and they start showing up in town. They're an objectively cool bird, even if they're common.
Yeah. Like, how could you get tired of ever seeing one of those? They're just so cool.
Yeah.
I did feel like it was very quiet, like on campus, because it was the time when school wasn't in session. So it was like there was not a lot going on. I'm like, we're out here looking at birds. That one guy yelled at us. Other than that, there's not much going on around town.
Yeah, it definitely clears out here during the summers. So that was a good time to be out and about birding.
Yeah, and then I think that day we went to that one lake. I don't remember what it was called.
Lake Carl Blackwell. Yeah.
Yeah, that one. And then we got our first look at Mississippi Kites, I think it was.
hmm And I
That was
think
cool.
we got a brief glimpse of a painted bunting there too, but then we ended up seeing those better down in the Wichitas.
Yeah, and was that the same day we did Gloss Mountain?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Gloss Mountain, because I doubt a lot of people listening have heard of it before. Would you say it's one of the best hot spots in Oklahoma, or would you say it's just the uniqueness of it makes it worth a visit?
It's the uniqueness. It's also like a really good insect hotspot. There's a lot of cool bugs there. It's good herping. It's not really heavily birded because you get the painted buntings there, you get the rufous-crowned sparrows there. But a lot of those can be found elsewhere in areas with more rare stuff. So honestly, it's not one of our top hotspots, I'd say.
Hmm.
But it's basically just like you're driving and it's this big plateau that you can climb up. And wasn't it originally called Glass Mountain?
Well,
Because
I
they
think
have,
there was a cartography error where it was supposed to be Glass Mountain, but it got read as Gloss Mountain, and so now people call it both.
but it has these like little shards that look like
Of
glass.
gypsum crystals, I
Yeah.
believe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Yep.
really, and it was really cool because it is glassy. So there's some areas where it does just look like it's shimmering and shining, and there's stairs that actually take you to the top of whatever the
They're like
landform's called.
it's a plateau, right? Or do they call it something
Yeah.
else?
Or
Okay.
like a mesa, I guess, because
Mesa.
Yeah,
it's a little bit
Mesa.
smaller.
And then there were like collared lizards and tarantulas on top of it. So that was really cool too.
Alex, you and the tarantulas is always hilarious to me, especially because there's such a large contingency out there of people that don't like spiders. And you're always just like, hey, tarantula, cool. And then it'll climb on you. I was telling somebody about it once, and I was like, yeah. And then he just like picked it up and, climbed on him. And he was like, yeah, here it is, tarantula. And they were just like about to vomit. But I was like, nah, they're pretty friendly little guys.
Yeah, they're mostly harmless. Like if they bite you, it's supposed to just feel like a bee sting, but I've never been bitten by one. So
How many have you
usually you can
handled?
just pick them up. What?
How many of them have you handled?
Say 20 to 30 or so.
Never been bit?
It's actually less than I thought it would be. I thought it would be like a couple hundred.
I really don't come across them that much. We were lucky with how many we saw, especially when we went down to the Wichita Mountains, because we saw like 7 or 8 of them crossing the road there.
Yeah. And so we did Lost Mountain the one day. Next day we do Wichita
I
Mountains.
think so, but I remember before that, that day we were in Stillwater, we went to the insect blacklight areas, the insect traps.
Yeah, so we did a little bit of looking for bugs too. There's a area in Stillwater, a place called Insect Adventure, where we have a lot of like live tarantulas and walking sticks and things like that we use for outreach. And there's a little black light trap that is just running every single night there. So it brings in insects that are attracted to it, and then they fall into this little cage that's tall enough that people can walk into it. So you just go in there and you can see all these cool nocturnal insects that you otherwise wouldn't get a chance to see.
Yeah, and I think Ryan really appreciated being with someone who really knew their bugs well, because it's so much more fun when you have one who's like, Alex, what's this?
I was just about
What's
to say
this?
that actually, like being with someone that's knowledgeable and passionate about a topic makes it so much more enjoyable to learn about that topic. So I remember we went into the insect trap and we would just be like, what's this one? What's that one? And you'd be like, oh, that's one of these. And then you just like stick it onto us. Be like, here you go. And you'd like put it on us and be like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, and there was the
Yep.
best beetle that you described as like the Cadillac of beetles. This is shiny and black, smooth beetle.
Yep. I think we also got the grapevine beetles because they have the really sharp claws and just kind of cling to you really well.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, those were
that was
cool.
fun. But
Yeah.
going on to Wichita Mountains, that one, as opposed to Gloss Mountain, had like way more forest and like kind of lush areas to it. And I remember when we came in, that bison got really close to our car and it was just chilling there. And I remember even in the video, someone was like, good job not getting rammed by that bison. I'm like, we were not going to get close to that thing. That was very intimidating.
Yeah, that's a really cool place. So the Wichita Mountains is this like uplifting of granite in southwestern Oklahoma. And it's just these big rounded, I guess they're mountains, hills. Probably someone from out west will make fun of me for calling those mountains, but they're pretty big for mountains or hills in Oklahoma. Um, And it has a lot of kind of forested areas with a lot of like cedar trees. Bird wise, it has some kind of western disjunct things, such as the rufous crowned sparrows. But the big highlight in the summer are the black-capped vireos, which
Definitely.
only breed in central Texas and the Wichita Mountains, pretty much.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's got to be one of the actual specialty species of Oklahoma, I would think, just because that's really the only place other than in Texas where you can find that species, which fortunately we actually were able to find, which was really cool.
Nice. Yeah. That was fun because we saw the one deep in the bush, and then didn't we end up seeing one better later? Or
Yeah, we had one pop out, a male, for a bit. So we actually
yeah,
got pretty good views, and then we did have the painted bunting earlier, which was exciting.
White-eyed vireos were there too.
Yeah.
yeah.
There's the
Oh,
cat.
there's the
Here's my
cat.
cat.
What's
This
the
is
cat's
Marble.
name? Marble?
Marble.
Nice.
Yeah. We'll put you back down here.
I love how anytime somebody has a pet on, they've made an appearance.
Good job keeping your cat inside, Alex.
Thanks. Yeah. He's not catching any birds in here.
They're very good.
Yeah. So what I wanted to ask is, you've been part of the Wisconsin birding scene and the Oklahoma birding scene. What is it like in Oklahoma in terms of how connected all of the birders are? Is there a big, group? Is it a small group? What's the whole thing like?
I'd say there's a fairly active group of birders in Oklahoma. I don't know exactly how the numbers compare Oklahoma versus Wisconsin. But I'd say they're comparable and pretty well connected. So like at least in Payne County, we have a lot of us who are birders that are at Oklahoma State. So there's a good handful of professors that either teach ornithology or even other things like psychology that are very active birders. And then there's a lot of grad students that cycle through that either work with birds or just have an interest in birds like me. And we all communicate pretty fast whenever like something rare shows up, or if there's a guided bird walk with the Payne County Audubon Society. We try to get a lot of people on those. At the state level, there's a couple of Facebook groups that we use to communicate. You obviously get your rare bird alerts on eBird to see what's been seen around. But yeah, I'd say there's a pretty active group of birders, especially around the Tulsa, Stillwater, and Oklahoma City areas. But there's oftentimes folks going out to the Panhandle to bird and other places like that too.
When you mentioned the professors birding, I just pictured a guy like after school, like a student coming up being like, "Hey, do you have my test graded?" And he just like goes into his drawer, pulls out a pair of binoculars and says, "Nope, going birding."
Yep. There's one of the professors goes birding pretty much every morning and every lunch break. So he's out there every day. He finds a lot of the good stuff in Payne County.
Interesting. Is it tricky birding there? Because I'm assuming that there's so many areas of the state that are different habitats that are kind of in the corners of it. So like, Wichita is in the southeast, Wichita Mountains.
Southwest.
Southwest. And then you have the Panhandle area. Is it kind of tricky to get around everywhere?
Yeah. So like there's a guy who did a big year in the state last year. And depending on where rarity showed up, like he was in Oklahoma City, so he was pretty much smack dab in the middle of the state. And he'd still have weekends where he'd have to drive 5-6 hours out to Black Mesa at the far western end of the state to get some of the rare birds that show up there. And on the flip side, 4 hours in the other directions puts you at Red Slough Wildlife Management Area, which is essentially like a little piece of like the Gulf Coast stuck into Oklahoma. So it's got anhingas, it's got neotropic cormorants, it gets purple gallinules and roseate spoonbills and things like that. So it's a really long state as far as driving is concerned. So there's a lot of ground to cover.
Yeah, I always wondered what it was like doing a big year in a state like Texas compared to doing a big year in a state like Rhode Island.
I would love to do a Rhode Island big year, although you'd probably spend most of your time watching the ocean.
It'd be interesting. But having been in Oklahoma for a bit, do you have a top 5 places to bird in Oklahoma?
I do. And I figured you would ask that, so I have a list.
You've done your
Wonderful.
research, didn't you? You listened to what we
I
asked
did. I
yesterday.
listened to the last podcast and
We love a
kind of was
prepared
hoping.
guest.
You
Yeah.
were like, I'm not gonna waste any time in getting this put together because you didn't want to be caught off guard, and I appreciate that.
I just didn't want to miss anything. Like, I would feel so bad if I was like listening to the podcast later and I was like, oh, how did I forget the Wichita Mountains or something like that? So
you'd put on the spot like, bird in Oklahoma City. That's it. That's the one.
Yeah. No, so I would say the top two hotspots for me by far are Red Slough Wildlife Management Area and the Black Mesa area. So Red Slough, far southeastern corner of the state, it is the highest species count hotspot in Oklahoma, and it just gets all sorts of rare southeastern things that are fairly common there. In addition to birds, there's like alligators and things like that. But it also gets weird vagrants. There's been hurricanes that have brought up like Gulf Coast, like terns and seabirds and things like that. Currently, there's a pair of vermilion flycatchers there right now, which is just kind of random. On the flip side, Black Mesa is kind of in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. So that's getting things like Woodhouse's scrub jay. During the winter, it gets like black-billed magpies, Steller's jays, juniper titmouse. In the summer, there's hepatic tanagers, black-throated sparrows, things like that.
Wow, that's crazy. Cool.
So those are definitely the top two just because of how wildly different they are while still being in the same state. I'd say the Wichita Mountains is my third. Just the scenery and everything else that's there, good birding. I went down there this summer and had zone-tailed hawk as well, which was a lifer for me, and cave swallow. They apparently nest on the structures all around the Wichita Mountains, and I did not realize that when you guys were down. Otherwise, we probably could have got cave swallow there. But there's been a pair of zone-tailed hawks that's been breeding there for 2 or 3 years now, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
In fourth place, I would say Great Salt Plains. This is in the same general area as Gloss Mountains, but it is just a giant salt flat. And it's got a lot of wetlands there. It's a national wildlife refuge. So it gets tons of shorebirds during migration. It's one of the more reliable areas in Oklahoma to see whooping cranes. You get tens of thousands of sandhill cranes, tens of thousands of waterfowl. Snowy plovers breed there, least terns breed there. So as far as waterfowl and shorebirds are concerned, that's probably the best spot for those in Oklahoma. And then lastly, I have the Tallgrass Prairie Preserve. It's in the northern part of the state. It's the largest remaining tract of tallgrass prairie, and it's got a lot of your tallgrass prairie specialists like greater prairie chicken. It has lots of dick sissels. It's one of the few places in the state you can regularly get Henslow sparrow. In the winter, it gets trumpeter and tundra swans sometimes. So it's just a cool place all around to bird. They have a huge bison herd there, and it's wild to see this habitat that at one point took up a good portion of the central United States, even into southwest Wisconsin, that for the most part doesn't exist anymore.
Awesome. That sounds like a pretty thorough list.
Yeah, that sounds like a great list.
I do have to ask, how tall is the tall grass in the tall grass prairie? Are we talking like Jurassic Park Velociraptor scene tall, or?
I mean, I'd say above my head for sure. I'd say a lot of it is 6-7 feet tall at its tallest.
That's neat.
Yeah,
like, there's a Henslow sparrow in there somewhere.
Herd only for the most part. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did a lot of field work there for my research. So I was out sweep netting this tall grass that's like taller than me for grasshoppers, which when they have that much of an area to live in, you don't catch very many. But
did you ever accidentally just swoop a Henslow sparrow in your net?
I did not. No, they managed to avoid me. But I did have some right next to one of my transects, and they weren't real happy about me getting so close to the nest.
Yeah, that checks out.
So you covered the spots to bird. Now I have to ask you, what do you think? I'm going to say top 5, but if you don't have a top 5, what are some of the best birds to get in Oklahoma?
So I would say looking at best as things that are kind of regionally unique and showy and things that people want to see. I'll start out with scissor-tailed flycatcher, of course. It is our state bird. It is a spectacular kingbird with really long tails. And they are everywhere. You will not go to Oklahoma in the summertime and not see a scissor-tailed flycatcher. They have this nice like salmon pink patch on like their wing pit, armpit, whatever you want to call it. And they're just really fun to watch as they like sally out and catch insects and land back on their perch. They're just very photogenic and fun birds to watch. Secondly, I made a list for this one too. I'm planning ahead. Painted bunting. I know it's a little bit more widespread in the South, but they're pretty easy to find in Oklahoma. Very colorful. So that's just kind of an all-around good bird. Third, we discussed it a little bit with the Wichita Mountains, but black-capped vireo, just because it is so range limited, and they're fairly easy to get at the Wichita Mountains. Fourth, I have greater prairie chicken. They're at the Tallgrass Prairie Preserve, kind of an iconic prairie species. Really cool to see. And then fifth, there's a couple of different birds that winter in the southern Great Plains that can be challenging to get outside of the Central Flyway. Smith's longspur is one of them. I am not choosing that because they are terribly difficult to see. Like, they're fairly common around the Stillwater area, but 95% of the time you just hear them flying over. Maybe you see a little speck of a bird, but they're very difficult to see well. So I'm choosing Harris's sparrow as number 5.
Very good. I do think, because we talked to Tiffany Kirsten a while back, and when she was doing her big year, she mentioned trying to go to Oklahoma to see the Smith longspurs. And
yeah, she got them at Sooner Lake, which is about a half-hour north of Stillwater. It's this huge lake. There's a power plant there. You can walk out into the prairie and hear in some pasture land, and it's probably the most reliable spot in the state for Smith's longspur.
Can you just tell me where anyone found anything in Oklahoma? If I'm like, this guy, this species, where did he get it?
No, but she was actually birding with one of the professors here that like helped show her like where to get Smith's longspur. So cool. I remember that distinctly.
Yeah. So, and we get Smith longspur here, like 1 or 2 every spring, it seems like. So they move a little bit, but they're actually one of my favorite birds because it's such a distinctive facial pattern that the males have. And then just that peach color is a color you don't really see that much in bird species around here, at least.
Yeah. I've had them in Indiana too.
Cool. Yeah. They are iconic enough. We made them
there you go.
Payne County Audubon Society logo.
That's pretty cool. I like that shirt. I've got to get one of those.
Yeah. You can get them on our website.
Awesome. What's the website? Just Payne County Audubon.
Yeah, just Google that and you can find it.
That's close enough. Also, got to mention scissor-tailed flycatcher, state bird of Oklahoma on the state border. So well represented there.
Probably
one of the best state birds for sure.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
It's not like, no offense to the common ones, but like chickadee, cardinal, robin.
It's the repeats. Like, the one.
Every single southern state that has northern mockingbird as its state bird, like, come on.
You're like, just stop it.
If there's anything that really needs to be updated, it's probably the state birds.
That's actually true. Yeah, they should probably update all the state birds.
Yeah, I know there was that study that came out. I don't remember what organization did it, but they gave each new state like a hypothetical state bird based on actual data. So it's like, 64% of the species breeds in this state. So like that should be the state bird for this one. And it was actually like pretty well thought out. It was cool.
That's neat.
So do you have a favorite memory of seeing just, a bird or a rare bird in Oklahoma?
I wasn't prepared for this one. I will say
it's a tough question.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of cool birds here. It's one of the more recent ones, but one that I do really like a lot is I was out in the Black Mesa area with my sibling this spring. And at that point, one of my top nemesis birds was black-throated sparrow. For those who aren't familiar, black-throated sparrow is this kind of gray sparrow with some really bold, like black and white facial markings. So it's a little showier than like your average sparrow. And they just breed in this one little area around Black Mesa. There's a Easter pageant set up there, kind of like at the Wichita Mountains. Mm-hmm. It's at the edge of some hills. And we were just walking around, like listening for them pitching a little bit, and I heard one nearby. So I was like, okay, let's like get down. I'll like pitch for it, try and find it. Emerson has the really big camera, so I was like, you just be on guard and like be ready to take pictures. So I pitched a little bit, and this male shoots out from the bush, lands like 4 feet next to the side of us, and like just slowly turns and gets a handful of photos off before it goes back into the bush. And those photos turned out great. It was an amazing way to kind of eliminate like a nemesis bird that I had been trying to get out at Black Mesa for 2 or 3 years at that point. So that was a really fun one.
Derek, what was your moment like that? If we're gonna put him on the spot, then you should be on the spot too.
For what? Just
What was your
in
like?
Oklahoma?
No, just well, yeah. Let's go Oklahoma since we're talking about it. What was the one that you saw in Oklahoma that you were like, yes?
I mean, I think for me it was probably like the painted bunting, because that was one that I'd seen. Yeah, it's on the cover of the Stokes like guide to birds that
That
we
is
have,
one of those
like,
birds that doesn't look realistic because it kind of looks like a child painted it.
Yeah.
Like, why would you ever put those colors
It's just
together?
like it's such a iconic bird when you're paging through the bird book that it just sticks out so much. So when we got really good views of those at the Wichita Mountains, I think that was like for me one of the top experiences in Oklahoma. And I think that's one where they're in a lot of states, but they're not necessarily easy to see because they're like in Louisiana, but I didn't see them very often when I was down
They
there.
show up in like South Carolina, so when I would go to Hilton Head, I would always keep an eye out for them, and I could never get one.
Yeah, they can be tricky for sure.
Yeah.
What was yours?
It was probably the black cap vireo because going back to talking about the black cap vireo, we were walking along this river in the Wichita Mountains and we kept hearing vireo chatter. And we were not super familiar at that time with vireo noises in general. So we were like, oh, that sounds like vireos. Like, let's follow them. And we kept trying to get looks at them and they turned out to be white-eyed vireos. And then we saw one that was deep in a thick bush and we got like pictures and videos of it. And it looks like it's probably a juvenile black capped, but it's like kind of a weird looking bird. And it would have been very unsatisfying to call that one like the lifer, even though I think it was that. But then we went on to this other place where we were kind of like climbing on some boulders and that one just popped out. So it was kind of like a relief because it was like you get your definitive lifer looks, not like this weird hanging Chad lifer where
Yeah.
you're like, it probably was it, but
I do feel like I appreciate those views more, kind of now learning more about black cap vireo and kind of like how rare it is to find. There was one that showed up in Louisiana in the southwest corner that some people did get to see. Me and my friend were going to Texas, so we stopped there, but we like barely had any light left and we missed it. But yeah, this is a cool bird for sure.
here's a off the wall question.
Yeah.
Are you ever going to do the Colima Warbler hike?
I want to one of these days, but that's still a long drive from Oklahoma. So
That's
I haven't got down there yet.
Texas. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a couple other, there's some insects in the Big Bend area that are a little higher priority at the moment. But if the timing works out overlapping, I'd love to try and get that one.
If we do the Colima Warbler hike, are you in?
I'm in.
I think that we were talking to someone about this. They said you can camp at the top of it. So I think that
Oh,
it would
cool.
probably be the best move to go camp at the top just so that you don't have to climb all the way up there and then try to climb all the way back.
Yeah, we can set up a black light, see what cool moths are out there.
Ooh.
Ooh, Mothin.
I love it.
Yeah, because it's like 10 miles up and then 10 miles back, right?
That's how it usually
Yeah.
goes.
Yeah, then we wouldn't have to start at 1 a.m. or however they normally do it.
I think we start at 12. Just go when it's the hottest out, you know.
I mean,
Of course.
it's up high, so I'm sure it's not as hot as
You probably, that's what probably is tough too. You probably have to bring like some warm clothes. You probably have to like hike up, either carrying in like a pack, some warm clothes, because I bet when you get to the top, especially if you're going to camp up there, like it would probably be cold, I would imagine.
You'd have to bring a lot of water if there's no like campsite or anything up there too.
I don't know. That's something I just have no idea what it's even
It's
like.
apparent to
because
me
I've
now
never
we need
done
to
it.
do more research.
Yeah, if we're
Or
going there.
just wing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could just go, hope for the best.
Do you have a coolest birding experience from Wisconsin?
Wasn't prepared for that. You got him.
You
These
did.
aren't gotcha questions.
Yeah, no, I mean, I saw a lot of cool birds when I was there. I always like coming back in the winter and just seeing what rarities are around right now that I can like chase that are fairly close to home. Um, this year I really had a lot of fun with the Gray-crowned Rosy-Finch. So I'm sure you might have talked about this, or people will see it on your YouTube channel or
That's all
whatever.
we talk about.
Every single podcast episode has just been the Gray-crowned Rosy-Finch.
I'm just like, yeah, we hiked that bluff at Devil's Lake and got the Gray-crowned Rosy-Finch.
I don't know if we mentioned it here. I was on the Looking at Birds podcast and we talked about it there. But for those that want to check it out, it's in the first of the year birding challenge video, or there's another video you recently put out where it's specifically going to find.
We talk about it all the time.
Yeah. Well, anyway, to sum it up, there's a Gray-crowned Rosy-Finch, which is this beautiful like pink and gray and black finch that's found normally in the Rocky Mountains. And there's at least one, maybe up to three currently.
There's just one.
Yeah, we think there's one.
Okay.
Because it was interesting, not to cut you off, but it was interesting because we were there with a bunch of people and we heard the call and it sounded like it was coming from some other direction. And people were like, oh, it has to be a second one because you can't see its, mouth moving or anything. But I looked at the video and it was chirping. And the call for some reason sounded like it was coming from off in the
Probably
distance.
just like the bluff acoustics or something. But nobody's seen two at the same time. So it just seems like it's probably one.
But it is weird how much it seems to move around. Because sometimes people will be like, yeah, I just had it over here, where it'll be almost like a quarter mile away. And then someone will have it somewhere else. So I don't know. But we think one.
Anyway, super cool finch. It's up on the beautiful bluffs at Devil's Lake State Park. And when we got there, it was me and my mom and my sibling, and there were like probably a dozen other birders up there, all walking back and forth along the one trail looking for it. And we were up there for about a good hour and a half or so. And I was like, I'm just going to go a little bit farther down this trail and see if I could find it. And I got maybe 100 yards or so. And it flushes off the trail it was like 2 feet from me, flushed about 3 more feet. So it was just like right in front of me, just sitting there eating seeds. So I called up Em on the phone and was like, hey, get everyone over here. I found it. And then we just sat there watching it and taking photos for a good 40 minutes before it took off. So that was a really cool experience. Plus the Townsend solitaires calling back and forth, and Devil's Lake in the wintertime is always a fun place to bird.
Yeah, there was a lot of Townsend solitaires up there this year. Like sometimes you can go up there and it's a struggle to find one, but lately it's been, you go up there and you can see have 6 different encounters. I don't know if there's 6 birds, but you'll walk the bluff and you see, 6 or hear 6 or so of them. But that Gray-crowned Rosy-Finch was a goober because it was just content to be in front of everybody who was there, to the point where, people that were taking pictures were like hoping it goes on this rock or like hoping it goes into this little patch of sunlight there. Usually with birds, you're kind of like, I hope I see it. And then it was like, I hope it does these specific things right now, since I've been watching it for, 40 minutes already and it hasn't gone anywhere.
Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but with us, it was very content to be in the shade. Like it barely stepped out into the sun and it would turn around and just hop back into the shade. So getting photos of it was a challenge, but also everyone taking pictures was like 3 feet away. So it wasn't that bad.
It was funny because there was somebody who lives in the area who said he goes up there all the time. And, it was the first time we saw it. So we were just excited to see it. And we're like, oh, we probably shouldn't get too close, because it'll flush. And he's like, oh, you can do whatever you want. You can go as close as you want to it. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, those birds that don't care. Like, I do wonder, I don't know, they don't seem like it, but, there's other birds where if you see it, it feels like a mile away, it can sense your eyes on it, and then it gets out of there.
Like the Rosy-Finch are hardcore in a David Goggins way that other birds aren't. Like, it just doesn't care. It's just like, I can fight you, and I don't care.
Was it getting chased by a Townsend solitaire when you were there? Because we saw it get chased once.
It wasn't. Do you know if anyone got photos of the two of them together? Because I heard a few reports of the Townsend solitaires harassing it, and that would be such a cool photo.
We saw it happen once, but we didn't get a photo or anything.
I
it was kind of like when we first saw it, like we were looking from
probably
the side.
Not the David Goggins of birds then, because he probably wouldn't let a Townsend solitaire chase him around.
I don't know. I feel like you just wanted to name drop David Goggins.
I think that we got to find out what a David.
Do you know who David Goggins is, Alex?
I have no idea.
He's like this hardcore. What is he? A Marine? It's not hardcore like ex-military guy.
I think it was the Marines.
He's like all about like when you think you can't do it, just keep going.
Just do it
Like
anyway.
really hardcore kind of guy. He would do the Colima Warbler hike, and then he'd be like, when he was done, he'd be like, "No, we do it 5 times."
He's an ultra runner, so he would do the Colima Warbler hike, yeah, like several times, probably like 100, and then keep going.
Well, yeah, you need to have the highest number of checklists of Colima Warbler on eBird. You got to just keep going up and down.
You have to do a checklist from the bottom in the start of the day, and then checklist from the top at the end of the day, and then continue that trend so that people know you're just going up and down.
Wouldn't that be an interesting video? Like I did the Colima Warbler hike every day for 365 days.
That would be like one of those days you're absolutely counting on it to go viral, or else you've just wasted a year of your life, but you're probably in amazing shape.
Yeah.
I was gonna say,
yeah, you would be so fit by the end of that. But
yeah,
imagine like in the winter when it's like raining and like snowy or whatever, and like you know you're not getting the Colima Warbler, and you just have to do the hike for the views. That'd
there's
be
probably some cool
depressing.
stuff up there in the winter, though, I would imagine, because I mean it is like a mountain. So
Clearly, this is something we need to learn more about in the
well,
future.
I definitely want to do it at some point. Probably when we get like some subscriber count that requires celebrating. Like that would be a funny celebration. I also feel like we'd have to do like a serious workout program beforehand, just get like severely ripped before we go.
Have like a good training montage going at the start of the video leading up to the Colima Warbler hike.
Funny story. Like sometimes companies will ask us if we'll do product reviews. And there was one time a company randomly was like, "Hey, would you be interested in reviewing this like exercise bike?" And I was like, "Sure, but we'd have to make it into some birding video. Like, you know, we could be training for something." And then I think they ghosted us and never got back to us again. But I was like, "We can train for the Colima Warbler hike." It's just like videos on this exercise bike.
You got to reach out to them, and then just like every like 5 minutes during the Colima Warbler hike, we just got to be like, "Oh, I'm so glad I had that blank exercise bike. Otherwise, I'd be dying right now."
20 exercise bike for allowing me to complete
I think we
this.
should reach out to like some fitness YouTuber and be like, "Will you train us as a crossover episode?"
That would be pretty funny.
Yeah.
So going back to birding, I always think this is interesting. Have you ever had any really sketchy experiences out in the field? Or like
You mean like paranormal or squatchy
not
experiences?
if there are, but like, you know, just anywhere you were like a little creeped out or something crazy happened.
I'll address the Sasquatch thing first. Not yet, but Southeast Oklahoma has an annual Sasquatch festival, and people go out on tours looking for them. So if it's going to happen, it's going to happen in Oklahoma.
Oh, okay.
As far as other sketchy things, I generally haven't run into that many like weird people out in the woods or anything like that. Some of our glade sites that I do research at, you get people on the trail cameras, and some of them are probably just out there drinking or whatever, but I haven't seen anything too weird yet. But I'm also allergic to paper wasps, or at least had an allergic reaction to them a while back when I lived in Wisconsin. So any trip can turn a little dangerous or sketchy depending on what insects are around.
Do you carry an EpiPen then?
I do. I just got some new ones actually this Christmas break, but I had a 4 years expired one for the longest time. And then I got stung by a few in Arizona this past summer. And it was a different species. I don't know if the venom makeup was different or what, but I had no reaction at all. So like that was good, but that could have been really bad too.
Yeah, we're glad you're updated and ready.
Here's a good question for you. What's the most painful sting you've ever received?
Paper wasp. And not just because of the allergic reaction. Like they have a genuinely painful sting. And usually I don't get hit by much else. I've been stung by bumblebees, honeybees, sweat bees of various kinds, and a couple other smaller wasps. But paper wasp is the worst one I've been hit with.
Tarantula hawk wasp. When are you going to do it?
I'm not doing it.
So when we were in Oklahoma, we were with our friend Michael too. Didn't you guys have a teacher that would sting himself with him?
Yeah, that's my advisor actually. So
how's he doing with that?
He's still doing it. He's branched out into non-wasps. He still likes it if I can catch him a cicada killer or something like that. But one class it was rainy and drizzly, so I couldn't find him anything. So he just had one of the students bring in a bark scorpion and stung himself with that.
Wow.
What does he do this for? Is it like the end of the semester?
So it's an incentive thing. If they get above a 75% on an exam, he will sting himself with something.
Does he
Dang.
do tarantula hawk wasp too?
Is it David Goggins?
Sure.
Sure. Which question?
He hasn't to the David Goggins one. He has not done the tarantula hawk wasp in class that I have seen, but I know he's done them before, and I'm sure he'd do one if I caught one. But they're not real common around still water, so I haven't had that chance yet.
We were down in New Mexico, and I've experienced this in some other places as well. I think in Texas, there's sometimes you get like a bush that just has like 15 tarantula hawk wasps on it. They will just like walk right by and you'd be like, ooh, that could have been bad.
Yeah, they're not aggressive at all because they're solitary, so they don't have a nest to defend like your paper wasps or your yellow jackets do. So they like you can touch them on the bush and they won't do anything to you.
Really?
I'm gonna pass
But
on
I
that
went
one,
to I went to an entomology conference in Arizona one time, and they said that in past years they did this thing called the Tarantula Hawk Wasp Challenge because the males don't sting, the females do. So it was to test how good you were at identifying the males. Is you just go up to the bush, you grab one, and if it's a male, you're fine. If it's a female, you get stung. And then they had to talk to the conference participants and ask them to please not do that.
Entomologists are wild.
Yeah, and you guys must have some crazy parties and stuff.
Yep. Yeah, we do.
He's like, I can't say no more than
and
that.
that's all I have to say about that.
What happens at the Entomological Society of America meetings stays at the ESA meetings.
Oh, I remembered too. I was thinking about this while you were talking. Another time that you were birding with us was actually at the Saxon Bog.
Yes. Yeah, that was my first time birding with you guys.
Yes, because our friend Bill, he just is like, yeah, I invited this dude named Alex who posts in the birding groups and stuff. I still don't know how that ended up happening. He's just like, yeah, I invited him, so he's coming.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly how that went down either. I know I had been like in contact with him and you guys about like trying to take a look at those like long-eared owls in southeast Oklahoma. Um, and then somehow I ended up just getting invited to go to Saxon Bog. So that was fun.
That's how it happened. That was a great trip.
Yeah. Yeah, that was really cool. I went back there with my family 2 winters ago, I think. Didn't get any great gray owls, which was a little disappointing.
Yeah.
But got my lifer Bohemian waxwing and my first good view of a boreal chickadee. And I think there was one other thing that I had that time that I didn't have the time before. So it was fun.
Yeah, you bailed on a
But
boreal chickadee excursion that day because you went home with Rob.
I did.
Really.
Didn't you guys
Yeah,
see crossbills or something though?
Yeah, we got red and white wing crossbills as we came back through Wisconsin.
I mean, that's pretty cool.
But it's not a boreal
It's not
chickadee.
a boreal chickadee though.
We had to work really hard for that boreal chickadee. It was like snowing and we were up in like the highest point in Minnesota and eventually there was one along the roadside.
Yeah, that was cool that you got it though. And you guys got some pretty decent videos of it, didn't you?
It was like decent for what it was, like for what the encounter was.
Yeah.
You could at least tell what it was. So
yeah, but we'll probably talk extensively about the Saxon Bog at some other episode. But we saw like everything when we were there together with our group because we got the boreal owl was awesome, several great gray owls. The we got black-billed magpie, which is like not really uncommon there, but it's not common. Three-toed woodpecker, that's not usually there.
And blackback.
And blackback, and we got hawk owl,
sharp-tailed grouse.
Sharp-tailed grouse, yeah.
Yep.
We got pretty much everything we wanted to see.
Pine grosbeak.
Hoary redpoll.
We did get hoary redpoll. It's still a species.
For now, yeah. Do you currently have a nemesis bird?
I don't actually.
You need a new one.
Yeah, what's
man.
the matter with you? We'll pick you one.
Yeah. We can
okay, pick me one and that'll be my new nemesis bird. But go ahead.
I was gonna say it'll be some like we'll just spin a wheel with all the birds and it'll be some species in like Senegal or something. Like, my nemesis bird.
Yeah, I can hold that as a nemesis bird for a long time. Until very recently, limpkin in Oklahoma was a nemesis bird. I'd go to Tulsa to look for a warbler at Oxley Nature Center, and then as we were leaving, the first limpkin there of the year would show up. We went to Great Salt Plains with a whole group birding, and the day after we left, a limpkin showed up. So I was not participating in hot limpkin summer until this November, and I got two of them in Oklahoma, and then I got one in Louisiana, and then in December, on the last day of the year, I got another two limpkins in Tulsa. So I got them now pretty well, but it took a while to get there.
We're glad you turned your sad limpkin summer around.
Yeah,
Do you have rhinoceros auklet yet?
I do.
Oh, how about tufted puffin?
I do not have tufted
That's
puffin.
your new nemesis bird.
Perfect.
Where'd you go in Louisiana?
So we were working on getting my grandma to every state because she's been to every state except Louisiana and some of the New England states. So my family and her came down for Thanksgiving break, and then we just drove down there just to Shreveport area since that was like the corner closest to Oklahoma, and stayed overnight there. Did a little birding. I got brown-headed nuthatch, which gave me all four nuthatch species in the U.S. for the year, which was fun.
Nice.
And then drove back.
Okay, that's cool that you did that for your grandma. Did she get them all now?
It still needs to go to New England, but that'll probably be next spring or fall, probably next year.
Okay, cool. We wish her luck on her quest.
Thanks.
And we wish you luck on your quest to see the tufted puffin finally.
I know. Yeah, I gotta head west now, I guess.
Tough.
I was so since we had the Gray-crowned Rosy-Finch, I was looking at different places that got the other Rosy-Finch species. And we were saying it's funny because it's like black Rosy-Finch and then isn't it brown capped?
I think it's
so
brown
there's
capped.
like no thing they follow where it's like gray crown,
black crown.
Yeah, it's like they're all
crown.
different. But I was trying to find the different places where you could get all of them. It looks like at least there's a place in Montana, maybe, and then a place
Sandia Crest, New Mexico is where a lot of people get them. I've been wanting to make a trip out there in the winter. Maybe I'll do it this winter. Maybe I'll wait till next winter. But it's right outside of Albuquerque, and there's just a guy who runs the feeders up there and just keeps feeding them all winter long, and you can get all three Rosy Finches real easy up there from what I've heard.
That sounds awesome. Maybe we should just fly there, spend a day, and then fly back.
You get some of those Southwest Airlines deals.
Hey.
Yeah. Those mountains also have like Clark's Nutcracker and Juniper Titmouse and some other fun stuff. So it could be a good trip.
Clark's Nutcracker was our nemesis bird for a while. Or at least mine.
No longer.
Bird. Yeah, no longer. We got some really good views of them at Crater Lake.
Were you in
that
town
could be a
for the
nemesis bird
Wisconsin
for me.
one?
What did you say?
Were you in town for the Wisconsin one?
I was not. The one in Madison?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't back yet. Madison had it good for like, was that October or November that they had like a limpkin and Rufus hummingbird or Allen's and
black-bellied whistling duck.
Rufus, yeah. Rufus hummingbird, black-bellied whistling duck, Clark's Nutcracker.
Yeah.
Yeah,
none of those stuck around until I came back. That's okay.
So for newer people getting into birding, do you have any advice for them, having done it for quite some time now?
Yeah, I would say like try and get involved with the birding community, like join whatever kind of social media you use, the Facebook groups, or get on Bird Talk or watch some of your guys' YouTube videos. Then also meet people in real life, and like if you can have people that can mentor you both on bird identification and birding in general, that can help a lot.
Yeah, definitely. Do you feel like you had a mentor, or did you just kind of learn on the fly?
I had a few. So my grandma was definitely a mentor. Also at UW-Platteville, one of the professors there who taught ornithology really encouraged my birding and kind of acted as a mentor to me there too. So yeah, I had a few.
Cool. Awesome. Anything else you would like to add to the podcast listeners?
I don't think so.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us, Alex. We really enjoyed having you. I feel like just hearing about all this stuff makes me excited to go back to Oklahoma at some point, and definitely need to learn more about doing the Colima Warbler hike and maybe,
Yeah.
getting those rosy finches, and you got to go get that tufted puffin.
Sounds good. Yeah. Next time I see you, I'll have a tufted puffin. Maybe.
Awesome. Well, thanks
We'll
so
see.
much for watching, everybody. This episode of the Badgerland Birding Podcast.